One word that comes to your mind when you think about youth participation in Foresight. One word. Any? Hope? What else? Futures? Futuristic. Imagination. Responsibility, creativity. Freedom, resilience. Amazing. Perspectives. Out of the box. Unconventional, yeah. Preparation. Amazing. Because today we're going to talk not just about youth inclusion, it's a very important component of the session, but also about youth innovation. So over time, youth is they are now engaging with a lot of decisions that they didn't make, but now they have to cope with that and co-create the future. And as they do that, they are not just saying, can I please speak? Can I have a seat at the table, as we used to say? But they are rebuilding the whole table and saying, you know what? We don't need to live by the same paradigms as before. And if we don't have a space, we're going to create our own spaces and do our own innovations. So a big component of this session is educational. We're going to hear about best practices, examples, how to get there, lived experiences. But at the same time, this is a call-out session to decision makers, to policy makers, and to Foresight practitioners, because they are missing a lot when they don't consider youth as a key stakeholder. So let's have this in mind as we talk to Belén Yaspana. She's part of the Youth Voices Network from Teach the Future and a dancer. Darragh, McKee, she's Child Empowerment at OECD Center for Education, Research and Innovation, and also a dancer. And Shai Naides, Chief of Youth Engagement and Strategy at UNICEF Innocenti. Are you a dancer as well, Shai?
Yeah, actually, probably not as good, but I try.
Yeah, lovely.
It's important to try things,
Yeah, so maybe, the happy hour we can have some lessons. So I wanted to start with you, Belén, as a young person. How do you feel when you see all these decisions being made on so many levels? Do you feel included? And when you talk to your peers, what do you talk about? What is the sense of inclusivity for you at the moment, in general?
Hi, Thays, and hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. After to be involved in these topics about leadership and a community, I feel that I have not a vote or a space to raise my voice. But when I found a Teach the Future and this wonderful community, I could be explain my ideas and to be really young that have a different perspective and also be a change maker and have a powerful impact in my community. I am a dancer and I use this powerful tool to empowering my community, specific girls, that have low-income resources, because in Peru there are different space that have not access to this amazing tool. So I bring them the opportunity to learn about dance, different style of dance, and also about know themselves, and know about their emotion that it's very important to take into account.
Wonderful. So Shai, let me come to you now, because Belén just said that about her participation and inclusivity at the Teach the Future. And there has been some other initiatives where youth is being more and more engaged in the policy-making space, multilateral spaces, and Foresight. But there are still a lot to be done, right? Yeah. And I wanted to know from you, what are the barriers and the pitfalls when we try to engage youth? What is meaningful engagement versus tokenism? And what kind of models UNICEF has been disseminating to help overcome these barriers and also have better ways of engaging with youth?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's really important to acknowledge that in the field of, in the multilateral system, there's been tremendous progress in when it comes to involving young people in policy and decision making, not just in the multilateral system, but also at a government level. And if you look at the last few years, especially the last 5 years, we've seen an explosion of investments and programs, initiatives, fellowships, opportunities for young people to apply, attend, from COP to other multilateral forums that are critical. So I think it's really important to start with an acknowledgement that a lot of progress has been made. Now, this is not a coincidence that it is happening. It is a response to what's happening in the world, right? If we look at parliaments, for example, around the world, half of the world's population is around 30, is young, basically. So half of the world's population are young people, but only 2.8% of parliamentarians are under 30 years old. Historically, youth have been locked out of spaces of policy design, decision-making, and in a way, it makes a lot of sense that governments are responding and the multilateral system also, because it is critical to do this in order to tackle this widening trust gap that is existing between generations. We cannot ignore this anymore. So huge progress has been made. Unfortunately, despite the great progress, there are a lot of barriers and issues that still need to be solved. So at UNICEF Innocenti, which is the Global Office of Research and Foresight at UNICEF, we've been doing research, and our research shows, working with young people who've engaged in the multilateral system, that too often those opportunities are very few. And when a young person finally makes it into one of these amazing opportunities, they find many barriers, issues getting their visa, issue getting financing. They often are expected to attend the big meetings, speak in front of very high-level folks for 5 minutes to inspire everyone. And then they go back home and there's no follow-up, no follow-through, no idea of, how has my contribution impacted or influenced the decisions made, and no follow-through either once they go back to their context and their community. Some of them even reported that after speaking in front of ministers on global stage, they can't even set up a meeting with the mayor in their town. So we really need to tackle these disconnects, and just want to say, big progress has been made, but there's definitely a lot that needs to be done. So in our office, we've been testing and modeling new mechanisms of meaningful youth participation. And so one of the things is our Youth Foresight Fellowship. You may have heard of it in the last 2 days. We're here actually with our fellows, so young people who are trained in strategic foresight and child rights, and they conduct foresight workshops and research at a country level. And we do that in partnership with UNICEF offices in order to ensure that we have a connection between the youth-led foresight and the policy and decision-making level impact. So their work is helping inform strategies, not just within UNICEF, but can also inform our advocacy as UNICEF supports governments when it comes to children's rights.
Wonderful. And Darragh, so we just heard about the barriers to even get youth at the table in the first place, and then even when they are there, Shai was talking about other barriers that come, the process, the follow-up, and how actually included they are. And there's one other barrier, which is about really, as Shai was mentioning towards the end of his answer, how much then the information that is shared by youth is actually incorporated. So from OECD, what has been your best practices identified to help countries not just hear youth, but really then inform the policies, the design and implementation with their needs, with their perspectives, with their experiences?
Yeah. I really love this question because, if we want to know what our children's perspectives, what their needs are, what their interests are, so we can bring that back and incorporate that into our policies, the answer is more straightforward than what you might think. We can ask them. We can ask them because, meaningful inclusion starts with a conversation by talking to children and asking them, what do you think and what matters to you? And what's important is that when they talk, we listen. And not just in like a superficial, polite, thank you for coming, check the box kind of way, but really genuinely listening and approaching their views with curiosity, right? Because this is at the heart of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Like Article 12 upholds every child's right to be consulted on issues that matter to them, issues that affect them, but it also places a dual obligation on adults to listen and to give those views due weight. And again, we can look to the Lundy model of child participation, which reminds us that meaningful participation doesn't just require us giving youth and children the space to voice their opinions, but it also requires an audience that's going to listen and the opportunity to actually shape impact, because, you know, as mentioned, what often happens, more often than not what happens is, you know, children's contributions just disappear as soon as they leave the room, and all that insight and that expertise into their own lives and their lived experience, it's just gone. But what we see in the research and in the best practice is that those policies that meaningfully reflect, you know, the needs, the interests, and the perspectives of people, young people and children, is those policies that began with a conversation by speaking to children and allowing their input to have influence over decision making. But also, what else is meaningful is that consulting the latest research and the latest evidence. So in our report published last year, What Does Child Empowerment Mean Today?, the team developed a set of reflection tools to help policymakers do just this. You know, look at the latest international evidence that's relevant to children and bring that back to their own discussions and their own conversations and help them make more informed decisions in policy contexts that are relevant to children. And just one last thing I would say is also being mindful of the role of the adults in this. You know, children spend so much of their time in school, and so we need to consider, like, what is the role of the teacher in all of this, and how can we best support them to engage children meaningfully?
Yeah, wonderful. So now I wanted us to move the discussion a little bit to the foresight space. So how youth is not just, as I said in the beginning, being included in foresight, and what does it mean and what does it bring to the conversation, but also how are they hacking the whole foresight system and bringing their own methods and then their own ways of thinking and doing. I'm going to go to Belén first, and then I wanted to hear from you, Shai. Belén, you said that you're bringing futures thinking to your community, to the girls you work with in the dance. How is it? How do you do it? How do they respond to that? And then I know that you created the curriculum, the new curriculum for Teach the Future with other Young Voices Network members. I wanted to know more about this process. What is it about? Yeah, please tell us.
Yes, first of all, I think all of us hear about Foresight, but we didn't know about future literacy, I think, or you think or hear about future literacy. Well, in Teach the Future, we implement like future literacy to bring that tools to implement in our projects, in our community. I think Foresight, it's like more to bring into a professional ambit. So, but a lot of people didn't know about like the process that it's future literacy, about, you know, the skills, to know the change, to know the leadership, and how to implement to become, to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. So in Teach the Future, we are part of this curriculum to teach the youth and also to complement in their projects and to have this powerful impact. About my project, I implemented, well, in the future I want to implement to the girls to know about this powerful topic that will help them in their future, because it's so powerful to know about change, to expect the future. Also, not to predict, it's like more to have different perspective and different alternatives to know what is going to happen and to be prepared and to create that ambit that will be to have the change maker in our futures.
And when you created the curriculum, how was the process for you? How did you feel? How you engaged with other members of the Youth Voices Network?
I'm really happy to have like the network, and we are like due to different part of the world, and I'm really happy, appreciate that all the brainstorming ideas to all of them, because we live different realities, and that will be like powerful to implement in the curriculum and to spread in more part of the world.
Wonderful. So, Shai, as we just heard again from Belén, youth is really creating even new tools, new toolkits, new ways of navigating futures literacy and foresight. What is your experience with the fellowship? Like, how have you seen, what kind of examples have you seen where foresight practitioners bring young, really meaningfully, ethically, in a deep way to the conversation? What kind of innovation youth has been able to create in this space, and how young people are really shaping the future of foresight?
Yeah, I mean, I think very connected to Belén's experience that she shared. This is very resonant with the experience of our fellows. I think that one of the key ways that young people are transforming foresight based on what we're seeing is that they want to move foresight from being a tool of analysis to being a tool of action. It's foresight for what, right? And in our experience, fellows and the youth networks that they've been engaging deeply care about making the world a better place. They deeply care about development issues, about rights, about their community. And so it's been quite a beautiful experience to see young people joining the fellowship, learning about foresight, then conducting foresight, and really owning it, not just as a tool to support our work, looking at trends or anticipating possible disruptions, but also looking at what does this mean for their community? What is the preferred future that they wish to see for their community? And then don't stop there, but looking at and so what? And how can we take tangible actions to make that future a reality? The other thing we're seeing young people do, so in our fellowship, one of the really important things early on was because foresight can be quite technical and jargony, it's quite intimidating, right? And I consider myself relatively new in the space, and I myself felt it was somewhat intimidating also sometimes. So working with young people all around the world, especially in the global south and the global majority, has also been really insightful to understand how the tools can be transformed to be more resonant with their local realities. And so whether it's Renz in Philippines with his network looking at what is the role of indigenous knowledge and bringing that into these youth-led foresight workshops. Or Korkemai, like we have this Future Child exhibit on level 1.
Which is fantastic.
Yes, check it out, please, if you haven't checked it out yet. We still have a few hours. There's all these elements that are really important for young people when it comes to their culture, their community, and really important knowledge that they wish to bring into those possible futures. And so this is in the exhibit, the Future Child from the persona from Kazakhstan has elements that are really kind of details that come from the culture in this country. So I think it's really important. The other point that I had was that young people, their participation in foresight, I really believe it's critical. Like, we've also seen that when young people lead foresight with their communities, they identify signals that have not been identified. They are living an experience of reality that is different to some of the experts who've been doing this work for very long, or the people making the decisions when it comes to policy design, right? So it's really critical that we involve them. For example, our fellow and young people in Mali last year were able to identify signals that really cut across multiple thematic areas like climate change, education, and gender, and we're able to identify possible disruptions that we need to anticipate, such as, we're already seeing early signals of this, like schools closing when it gets very hot because of climate impacts. But they took it to the next level. They really looked at, they used the futures wheel, so they looked at the first, second, third order of impact of what might it mean that children cannot go to school during the day. And they called it night mode education. What would a world look like in which children cannot study during the day because it's too hot and they have to learn at night? How would that then impact their ability to build bonds, relationship with their family, with their friends? When will they have time to play? So they were looking at impacts at that level, and really insightful information and insights and recommendations. And again, it's really important that we are ideally building these opportunities in spaces where we can go from insight to informing strategy, to informing recommendations in policy and decision making.
Speaking of policy recommendations, Darragh, in your work, what kind of examples do you have where children's participation really influenced the decision making and the shape of the policies at national and even international level?
Yeah. So in our work over the last year, we really have taken a deep dive into, what does child empowerment and child participation in decision making, what does it actually look like in practice? And one thing that we have seen is that even those smallest initiatives, when they're taken seriously, they can ripple outwards and influence decision making on the national level. So if I could give you an example from Luxembourg, a few months back, a colleague and I travelled to Luxembourg to observe classroom consultations with children at a local primary school as a part of Project Alpha. And Project Alpha is essentially a small, innovative policy initiative that wanted to rethink how children learn to read and write in Luxembourg. Because until this pilot, all children in Luxembourg automatically began their literacy education in German. And, this idea was to give children the choice between French or German, depending on what language was most comfortable to them and their families at home. So to test this, the Ministry of Education sat down with children in the classroom and asked them, how has it been? What's your experience in learning to read and write? And actually give them the choice to choose between the two languages for the first time. And what we observed was that these consultations were, very creative and very playful. If my memory serves me correctly, these children were 7 and 8 years old. So again, there was a lot of play. They were asked, how is your experience learning to read and write? What learning activities work best for you? What do you not like so much? What do you find challenging? And do you prefer a language in particular? And what these consultations revealed was just how multilingual daily life really was for those children. We witnessed children 7, 8 years old, switching between French, German, Luxembourgish, sometimes even Portuguese, English, like it was nothing. So that was very clear to us that, language played such a huge part in their daily lives and in their school experiences. So ultimately, the children and the parents involved in this pilot really supported this initiative, and their input directly shaped national education policy. So from the next academic year, 2026-2027, this reform is going to be rolled out nationally across Luxembourg based on this small consultation with these children where they were really listened to, and they said, actually, I speak Italian at home, so I would prefer to learn to read and write in French. And, they were really listened to, and they had an impact on a national level. So for decision makers, the clear lesson here is that, the opportunities for children to influence decision making shouldn't just rely on one enthusiastic teacher in the classroom or, one really passionate champion in government. Instead it should be embedded into institutional practice, because when this becomes a norm of policy making and decision making, it not only fulfills children's rights, but it strengthens policy. And from what we can see, it benefits everyone, from individual children right to wider society as a whole. So from our perspective, rebuilding the table really is about having systems where children are invited to co-create decisions that are going to affect their present and their future, and also trusting that adults are listening and supporting them every step of the way. And early next year, we have a report coming that will have much more examples, just like this one, of children really shaping decisions at the local, regional, national, and even the international level. So keep your eye out for that.
And if we take... It is a very inspiring initiative. And if we take this to the even next level, where, so we already included children, we eliminated the barriers, we are making policies informed by what they are bringing. Then then we are also talking here, and Belén brought this experiences, and Shai and you, of child-led initiatives. They are at the front of the initiative. They are creating this, inventing this. How can policymakers be prepared for child-led initiatives in a meaningful way?
Yeah, that is a great question, because over the last year, what we have seen is that those countries that are best prepared for, meaningful youth initiatives and meaningful participation are those with the right culture and the right institutional attitudes and perspectives towards children. Because, this is where it starts, being genuinely excited about bringing the children into the process and being curious of, what do they have to say and how are they going to help shape this process and shape these outcomes. And so again, as you were mentioning about barriers, so one of the biggest barriers that we still see to meaningful participation is how adults perceive children. So if empowered children are, beings and not just becomings, it's important that we value them, not just for who they're going to become in the future, but who they are right now, as they are right now, and, how their perspectives and how their visions of the future are going to impact what they bring to the table today and influence the conversations that we have now. Because there are still these persistent attitudes that undermine children as the competent social actors that we know that they are, and this can really limit the institutional willingness to co-create with children. But real meaningful participation challenges those traditional hierarchies between adults and children, and it requires like a willingness and a readiness to let go of those adult-centric ways of thinking and of doing, but there's going to be a fear in this, right? The fear of being challenged by a child, maybe even proved wrong by a child. But this is exactly where the gold is, because as it's been mentioned, children can really open our eyes to those blind spots that we can't see and show us, other pathways, other solutions that we would never have came up with on our own, because they can really bring so much synergy to the perspective and to the conversation. And also, those countries that are best prepared are those who are embracing inclusion. Because so often these child-led initiatives include the same already super confident, well-resourced children, and we don't hear enough from those seldom heard voices, children from a low-income background, a migrant background, children with disabilities, those younger children maybe under the age of 12. But countries can prepare by, actively reaching those children, seeking them out, making it a priority to ensure that children from all backgrounds have the opportunity to shape their present and shape their future.
Wonderful. Shai, with the UNICEF fellowship, you get in contact with so many great ideas. So over the years, right? Because it's been many cohorts.
Yeah.
What do you think is the vision of youth? Of course, it's not just one vision, but what kind of futures youth are really envisioning? And do these visions clash with the current systems that we have, and how do we move forward?
So I definitely don't feel prepared to share what the vision of the future of young people is, and that is partly kind of the question that informs the work that we do and why we do the programs that we do. But one thing is for sure is that as someone who has a very privileged position and view into how governance is working right now, I do believe that the future of governance needs to be different and needs to be co-created with young people. If you think about governance spaces, so I always like to speak about spaces also. So I don't know if you see like multilateral rooms, right, where you have member states, where you have stakeholders coming together. The space, I find the space fascinating because it, in a way, all the tables and chairs are bolted to the floor, and they're all facing forward to either one seat at the front or maybe a row maximum. And you do wonder, like, where does this come from? And of course, many of these spaces were built decades ago for a different time. So in a way, I always find it fascinating that we're trying to transform governance or explore novel approaches to governance that are more participatory. But the spaces in which these discussions are happening, these decisions are being made, are often not conducive to this. So I think that part of that future of governance is also what is the future of these multilateral and national governance spaces. And as Darragh said, there are countries that are really making an effort to bring young people into these spaces, to find ways of understanding where young people are at. And it's really important that we're elevating those cases and these countries. And as you said, also like key leaders who are really making an effort and mobilizing and campaigning internally to bring children and young people into these spaces. We need to elevate their work. We really need to celebrate them. And I just to the point that I made at the very beginning, just to acknowledge that huge progress has been made. And in a big way, it's thanks to heroes inside of the systems that are really helping us advance in the right direction. And just to say, again, it's really important that we do create these spaces, because young people in general, when from our work, but also when I speak with them, in general, you do get a sense that young people can be quite anxious about the future, and rightfully so. You know, in this global fragmentation, multipolarization that we're seeing is not very helpful. So I do think that that's an important thing to look at. I get a sense from the work that we're doing that young people really enjoy spaces that are participatory, really enjoy spaces in which they get to connect with other young people from other countries, with other perspectives, where technology is leveraged. So, you know, through the Youth Foresight work in our fellowship, young people have been articulating, you know, about the question of AI, for example, in education, right? And really challenging the notion that the way forward is to just ban AI, and more saying, no, we want to learn with our parents, with our teachers. We want to explore with them. We want them also to feel the freedom and the openness to explore this together. And so there's these really exciting pathways that if we can explore and unpack, we might be learning and moving a bit more into this possible future that is more intergenerational, you know, coming from a place of true respect for the perspectives of children and young people, their concerns, their priorities, and the futures that they wish to be a part of. So that's really important. The last point I just wanted to make is that as we see these bright spots and we see youth, you know, young people don't need to be given permission or space to lead. Young people are already leading the way, and young people are already building the future that will exist, that the future or the possible futures that we will be seeing. I think the more important question is for institutions and systems today to ask themselves whether they are creating the space for young people to be a part of their future also. And I think this is a really existential question, because ultimately, if systems and institutions don't pick up on this and work with young people as equal partners, they risk drifting into insignificance.
Yeah. Belén, I saw you nodding, as we all were nodding when Shai was talking about these anxieties of engaging with the future in the first place. I wanted to know more about your work with the girls. What is your vision for the future? What is their vision for the future? What do you think the future would look like if youth had more space to lead? And how are you also preparing to futures that are less desirable, right? So we dream a lot, but we have to be prepared. As you said in the beginning, it's not about prediction, it's about preparedness.
Yeah, first of all, Before to start talking about my project, I'm going to say that I'm really happy to have this space because it's the first time that all the members that are part of Texture Future meet here face to face for the first time. And that's the power of this connection and this community that empowers society, or the Foresight of future literacy. I'm really happy to share with them because some people think that we are the generation of the future, but I think we are change maker and we need to make the path for our future, and we are the generation of now to have an impact day to day for our communities. So I can bring that insights to my project to bring that girls a space that they can be their own self, they can shine, and they can be their own, the better version they have. So implement it and also to expect their future, to have different perspective, to build what they want. So yeah, I think if we create more space like that for youth, it will be so powerful because we are going to connect and we can see the different realities and the different perspective of the thinkers and how youth thinks and can co-create and support them to create wonderful things for the future.
Now I want to open for questions. We have about 10 minutes. Yes, yeah. I think we have a mic somewhere. Yeah, thank you, Irina. Yeah, right.
Thank you for your talk. Thank you for your initiatives you have put forward. I have a question more maybe for UNICEF. The best way to study one species is to let the species in its biotope. So when you take the young to go to the government, you take them out from their biotope. So do you have initiatives that do the contrary? You take the government and you bring them to their biotope, the young biotope. And I'm not saying education in the schools, because we know it's already out from their biotope. But do you have initiatives like that?
You want to take a few questions?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Oh, well, if you want, I can answer, but just wondering if you
yeah,
want to take
let's
a few
just so we have more time. Yeah, so let's take 3 questions and then we answer.
Hi everyone, I'm from the UNICEF fellow Shai was talking about. So my question is, and what I particularly noticed when it comes to youth participation, often the issue necessarily isn't participation. Organizations are open to that, or the ones I've noticed at least, but the issue is about meaningful participation. It becomes quite tokenistic, they will allow participation, but the real question is it even meaningful? And that's what I wanted to ask, how we can transform participation into more meaningful participation.
Grateful, thank you. There's one more here. Yeah.
Before I joined a multilateral organization, I was really engaged with young people in academia, and some of the best experiences I've had is participating and also facilitating hackathons. I don't know if they're still going on, but virtual hackathons they should be, I think, because we don't have to be physically co-located to come up with ideas and solutions. One of the things I remember is that, wow, we don't have, we question default assumptions, right? We are less anchored in our past failures. We haven't lived that long. No, this is when I was an academic. No. But I see these traits across generations. So they can be from a 12-year-old to 18-year-old, a millennial. I see this trait not just belonging to a specific age cohort, but really growing into what is the social norm. I come from New York City, and we just elected a Ugandan-born, Indian descent Muslim millennial as mayor, who is in charge of a $130 billion budget and has 300,000 employees under his purview. I think one of the things he's done so remarkably is that he's able to talk to millennials as millennial. He has a Gen Z Syrian artist wife. He was able to really talk to teenagers all the way up to other age groups. I'm wondering how you see the power of social media Because that's the space where they talk, really. Like when I do sentiment analysis, I always go to social media to hear what the buzz is. And do you think social media will help, if not formally, but informally, create that movement so that young people are participating, if not in a panel or whatever? I'm just curious just to hear about what you think of the young people's spaces in social media and their journey to leadership.
Thank you. Let's answer these 3 questions, and then do you want to start, Shai, with a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks so much for this question. In fact, I could not agree more. Like, as we're solving for issues, it is critical that we are meeting people and communities where they're at. In fact, there is quite an extensive practice of human-centered design when it comes to designing programs and initiatives, and the work that we do in terms of the kind of youth strategy at Innocenti, at the Global Office of Research and Foresight, is very much human-centered design kind of principles inspired, and we use them a lot. So definitely we bring children and young people into co-creating our fellowship, what we're going to do. And yeah, this is also happening at a programmatic level. So it's definitely something that we do, and I could not agree more. I mean, I think even when it comes to designing policies, it is critical that everyone who will be impacted by it or is a critical stakeholder in ensuring its success should also be part of those conversations, from the onset. And in fact, the exhibit that you'll see on level 1 is very much work happening in the intersection of futures and human-centered design. So articulating not just preferred futures for education, that comes from the research that our fellows like Ronit has done, but also kind of putting children within that future. So it's not an abstract future, but we're thinking about not just the people in the future and how they interact with it, but also children. So also thinking about what are they feeling, what are they seeing. We even created a methodology, and this is again going back to the methodological innovation by youth, a backpack model. So Mena Niazi, who works in our team, came up with this concept of creating backpacks and thinking about what would a child in 2050 have in their backpack. And even just that exercise is really fascinating and allows us to explore possible artifacts or gadgets of the future that children will have and that will support them.
Yeah.
Belén, maybe do you want to take the question on social media? Do you think that social media is a good tool for youth participation?
Yeah, I would say that seems like different opportunities like online, but I think it's good to have this face-to-face space to know each other, to connect, and to know about the history of each one. I think we learn more. We are like in a face-to-face and like topic and space. And I think social media is a good tool because we can share different opportunities. I found the opportunity to join Teach the Future on social media. So I agree it's a powerful tool to share these change maker opportunities.
Thank you. And Darragh, do you want to take the meaningful participation question? How to make participation really meaningful?
Yeah, of course. This is a big bulk of the work that we're doing right now. The report that's forthcoming for early next year deals with exactly this topic, so I'm going to try and keep this as succinct as I can, because once I start, I keep going. Okay, so I think in this context I can relate to 3 main points that we've seen. So to bring child participation from tokenistic, as you mentioned, to meaningful, one thing that's really, really, really beneficial is that element of capacity building and training for adults and for children. So again, one thing that we've seen, as I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, is these attitudes towards children, that children don't have anything to add to the conversation. We just have to wait for them to grow up, and then they can be useful to the economy and to society. So if we start with the adults, and give them a little bit of background training on children's rights. A lot of sometimes decision makers aren't even overly aware of Article 12 of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, that children, it is their right to be consulted, and also it is the adult's responsibility under this right to listen and to give those views due weight. And again, that also comes with understanding that the Article 12 doesn't say that, you know, children hold the whip and they have the final say on everything. It just means that those views have to be meaningfully considered and given due weight when it comes to making decisions. So when adults understand that, that really can get things going, and that can shift those institutional attitudes into a culture that's more conducive to bringing children into the space and having them participate meaningfully. And even for children as well, you know, it's also something that we've noticed in the research and in the evidence, that a lot of children and young people don't even know themselves that they have a right to participate and a right to contribute and a right to be heard. So again, when we start there, that can get the ball rolling. You know, an example from Scotland, this I believe it's the Scottish Youth Parliament. They also hold these workshops. They run the workshops to train adults in meaningful participation. And one thing that they highlighted was meaningful meetings that they brought to, meaningless meetings that they brought to the attention of the adults in the room. They would say, you know, you invite us here, we're sitting on these chairs, and we have no idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, this space is not youth friendly. We can't follow this conversation. So the fact that we spoke to a young woman who led those workshops as a young person for quite some time, and she would say the attitude and the perspectives really started to shift. And also, again, in that regard, the child and youth friendly materials. Again, I spoke to a young person in Dublin who mentioned that she was invited to a consultation to do with children's health, so, you know, vaping, smoking, alcohol consumption, things like that. And I think it was not even 48 hours before she was handed a 57-page document, you know, this thick, full of all this jargon that she didn't understand. And she expressed, you know, my attendance at that meeting wasn't meaningful. I didn't fully understand what was expected of me, the topic that was being discussed. So my contributions, although they, you know, came from the heart and I did my best, they weren't as meaningful as they could have been because I wasn't fully aware of everything that was going on. So again, this is why we look at those child-friendly summaries, child-friendly glossaries. You know, there's one initiative that we've seen where children are invited to ring a bell. If they're in the room and they're like, oh, I didn't get that, I don't know what that word means, they just ring the bell. And that's sort of lets the adults know, okay, we need to pause and make sure that the young people in the room, we're all on the same page here. And finally, the one final thing, I'm very, very sorry, is this idea of feedback and closing the loop. Because, you know, as you mentioned, you know, children and young people can walk out of the room and that's it. Everything just disappears. They have no idea what happens with their contributions. They have no idea what are the next steps, if there's going to be any follow-up. So coming back to children and saying, this is what you told us, this is what we did with your input, and this is the next steps that can make child participation more meaningful and steer away from tokenism. So I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. So to finish, I just would like every one of you to shout again a word that you now associate with youth participation or meaningful youth participation after listening to our panelists. Please. What words? Transformative disruption. Inspiration? Perseverance? Inclusion? Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming.